That was more than a win. That was a sign of redemption for three key White Sox players who had been struggling. Let's discuss how Miguel Vargas, Luis Robert Jr., and Sean Burke helped the White Sox crush the Brewers on today's episode of Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan. I write for SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the Fansided Network, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already, and also follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Well, the White Sox did not blow yesterday's game, and it was in part to Miguel Vargas, Luis Robert Jr., and Sean Burke, three players that are vital to the team's current and future success. And I want to discuss the recent trend of things getting better for them and how that can make things better this month. Then Chase Meidroth is back from the 10-day IL, and let's discuss how that is coming at the right time. And finally, let's discuss two pieces of news where one still means the White Sox lost a trade, but is another piece of evidence of how to handle Andrew Vaughn's struggles, and another that means the Sox sort of won a deal. Okay, call it redemption, call it revival, call it rejuvenation. You can call it a win. The best part was the White Sox got the lead early and didn't give it up. So progress, because that was kind of the theme in the first two games of the series against the Milwaukee Brewers. Obviously, the White Sox get the lead in game one, blow it. And I talked about it on Wednesday. Yesterday, or 2 days ago, they had it tied and blew it. So this time, they get out to the early lead and they keep the Brewers down. And the White Sox snap their losing streak to the Brewers, and they win in dominating fashion, 8-0. And it was due in part to three big performances from three key pieces to the team's immediate and long-term future. Miguel Vargas' heater continues. Luis Robert Jr. showed he can beat a team with his bat and his glove, and even with the speed that he has on the base pass. And Sean Burke looked like the pitcher you and I saw in that 4-game cameo last season and on opening day. So the other thing is, the other big takeaway is when the White Sox win, they crush a team's soul. And it's not because, oh my gosh, we just lost to the White Sox who lost an historic amount of games. They are just crushing teams when they do win. And that's weird for a team that only has 8 wins on the season. But outside of that 3-2 comeback victory on April 12th, the Sox have won by 3 runs or more, with 5 of them coming in the blowout variety. And remember, I think a blowout is 5 or more runs. I talked about it yesterday. If you lose by 4 or less, well, you still technically may have had a chance to come back and tie the game if you get the grand slam. So it's got to be 5 or more to me, because that's definitely, there's no opportunity at any point in the game to have tied it at least. And yesterday was also the third time an opponent trotted out a position player to pitch the final inning. I mean, that's the ultimate white flag. When you're just like, you know what? I don't even want to bother using my bullpen arms. And the Brewers did use a lot of their bullpen arms, especially with Tobias Myers only throwing 2 innings 2 days ago. They were like, you know what? Here's Jake Bauers. So, that's basically, who needs a closer? But on the flip side, the White Sox can just beat you to the point where you're like, you know what? I'm just going to use a position player. But the White Sox are going to basically then crush their opponent, or they're going to have their bullpen give up the game, and it's either going to be a slow bleed out, or it's just going to be of the immediate walk-off variety if the offense can't score enough runs. It seems like those are the 3 true outcomes right now. Blowout victory, or they're going to lose because either the bullpen over time is going to give up a lead, or they're just going to give up, the walk-off hit. That's basically what we've been experiencing this season. But hey, this show is to focus on some good today, okay? And man, oh man, there was some, basically, I would say, greatness from Vargas, Robert Jr., and Burke. So first, I will be happy to be loud wrong on Vargas if he can continue to hit on this pace. Even if he eventually caps out and he's just nothing more than a 240, 260 hitter, and even maybe a 1.5 F4 player, I'll take that version of Miguel Vargas. A WRC plus of maybe 105, 110. I'll take that. Because right now, though, I am loving this heater, especially because he made a small swing adjustment. Basically, where is he going to start, the bat, and where is he putting his hand? And it has turned into an 8-game hitting streak. And he's taken his average, that was rock bottom 139 during the Boston series at Fenway Park, to 222. And his 3-run homer with 2 outs in the 6th was definitely a showcase of his swing adjustment, as his bat got to that ball quickly. I mean, he basically just flicked that ball over the fence. And it's just a good showing overall of him taking advantage of his strengths, because he crushed an off-speed pitch, but also during that at-bat, he fouls off a fastball, he lays off a sweeper outside of the zone, and then boom, home run, and breaks the game wide open, because it was tight there for a while. It was just 1-0. And then in the 6th inning, Miguel Vargas, 2 outs, crushes a 3-run bomb after the Brewers made a bullpen change. So it's amazing what can happen when you accept your fate that you are on the White Sox, and instead of acting like a prisoner, realizing, you know what, I have an opportunity. I have an opportunity to play every day, to have a runway, as the White Sox believe. And it looks like, you know what, and this is going to be painful to say, but I can admit it. I'm not, as you can tell, I can admit when I'm wrong. Chris Getz may have seen that, you know what, the Dodgers can't give, a guy 400 bats if he's struggling, because they're in win now mode. But as the White Sox, they can. And it's looking like it's going to turn out. And as I said, if he continues to, even if this pace eventually levels off, and let's throw out he at least gets to being a 260 hitter consistently, then I'm going to be glad to be loud wrong when I said the White Sox made a terrible trade at last year's trade deadline. Because at least at this very moment, the White Sox are mitigating it. In this 8-game context, they've actually mitigated this deal, the Eric Fedde, Michael Kopech trade, especially since Michael Kopech is on the 60-day IL. Although you got to remember, the Dodgers will forever have won that deal, as Kopech helped LA win the World Series. I mean, they're going to be forever the winner. They got Tommy Edman and Michael Kopech, and both of them played big roles in them winning the World Series. Declared winner. All the White Sox can do now is hope they at least finish second in that trade. Because St. Louis, they got Fedde thinking, and Pham thinking that'll help them get to the playoffs. That didn't happen. But they're still getting decent production from Fedde. So right now, all the White Sox can do is hope you come in second in that trade. But I do think this swing adjustment that he's made will allow him to have a viable swing in the major leagues, to be a 1.5, 2 F4 player maybe. Because it's allowing him to get to the ball. It's allowing his bat to get to the ball quicker. Obviously he's still going to get out. It's baseball. Remember, even if you hit 300, that still means you failed 7 times out of 10. But the key is he's now got a swing that maybe can be able to catch up to those fastballs. And even if he gets his splits up on hitting fastballs to 200, I think it'll allow him to get, his numbers up just a little bit more, especially if he can get his bat to the ball on a lot of that off-speed stuff that he feasts on. And he's actually starting to hit fastballs much harder. Last year, 34.6% hard hit percentage, according to Baseball Savant. This year, 41.7%. Last year, he had an expected batting average of 126 against fastballs. This year's it's at 191, and I think he's at 160. So if he can, again, keep just getting that up a little bit more and then continue to feast on the off-speed stuff, you got the chance to have at least a very viable player. I mean, obviously not greatness, but when you boost your weaknesses even slightly, you could still be a good player. And again, I don't know if he's going to be a great player, but he's definitely trending away from being a bust, and that's progress. That's what you need. And he's showing the opposing pitcher, hey, I can fight off velocity and I can even put him in play just a bit more. So you can't just keep pounding me fastballs if he's facing basically a fastball pitcher. He's got to get to that. Now you got to try to creatively try to get me out. And if you're throwing off-speed stuff, he's feasting on it. Or even if they go with velocity like a fastball cutter, 92 to 95, he's hitting 333 off of cutters. And cutters, sinkers, and sweepers, those are his pitches. And then you got Luis Robert Jr., who bailed Sean Burke out by robbing Rice Hoskins of a grand slam in the first inning. And at least Burke acknowledged he owes Robert Jr. something after the game. I think a steak dinner. Steak dinner, boom. That was an amazing catch by Luis Robert Jr. Because I'll get to Burke in a second, but Hoskins looked like he hit a for sure grand slam to start the game 4-0. And Luis Robert Jr. just goes up. Nope. I mean, I wouldn't, I'd put that maybe top 10, actually, that at right field. I mean, that was a really darn good grab. And that totally swung the momentum back to the White Sox favor, and it kept 4 runs off the board. And again, that performance from LRJ reminded the league why he has so much value, so long as he's healthy, because he makes amazing catches. He can impact the game still defensively with his range, with his athleticism. And basically, he beat the Brewers with his bat, his glove, and his speed as he swiped another base. 13 stolen bases on the season, tying the lead last I checked. I think El De La Cruz was still at 13 stolen bases, and he leads the American League. But he is also starting to emerge from this early season funk. He's on a 6-game hitting streak, and you're starting to see him hit more mistakes. And as former host of this show, and now with CHGO, Sean Anderson, he pointed this out. He tweeted this out. This is at Sean_W Anderson. Pitches seen in the month of April by the year for Luis Robert Jr. And it breaks down that he is starting to see and take more pitches. He's not just, willy-nilly swinging at everything. That was a big problem, And I put that graphic up for those watching on YouTube. But you're seeing a much more disciplined Luis Robert Jr. at the plate. And I think his April struggle was just a combo of he hates playing the cold, and he's also still trying to decipher his new plate approach. You can tell, you can almost see it on his face. Like he still wants to swing at those pitches down and away or down and in, which I never understood why he was doing it. So he's still trying to be consistent. But then what pitchers are doing sometimes, and you're seeing some of these strikeouts still happening, is they're just throwing like a sinker or a curve or a slider down, and it's hitting down middle of the zone, causing him to strike out looking, for example. But you know what? I can live with him striking out looking every now and again, and I would like to see him maybe make the adjustment to then just fight those pitches off. Keep trying to get those, mistakes, because right now he's not seeing a ton of great pitches, obviously, because, teams, again, I still think, this is an example of he still has value. He can still be feared. They're not going to give him much because they don't need to pitch to Andrew Benintendi. Partially, he's in a struggle. Partially, they'll just get to Andrew Vaughn. I'll get to him in the third segment. But he's got to try to keep forcing, more pitches to get that mistake, and then he's got to catch up with that mistake. And he did that, yesterday. 4 RBIs, 2 hits. And this is a crucial month for him, as if he can continue to get his numbers up, then you might be able to move him for more than pennies on the dollar. I mean, that's why this month is crucial, because right now his trade value is still pennies on the dollar, and they still are going to have to trade him. That's why, you want him to get heated up in May. You actually do want the White Sox to have a pretty good May, because if he has a good May and he's heating up and he's helping the White Sox win games, that should help his trade value. The next 6 weeks are still critical, because right now, for example, I still think the Reds are demanding the Sox pay a major chunk of his deal just to get them to even possibly consider giving up one of their top 3 positional prospects. And keywords, possibly consider. And I don't even know if they would do that now, since Edwin Arroyo and Sal Stewart are at AA, so they've crossed that magical threshold of, well, now we want to keep them, and Cam Collier is injured. But if he produces a really good all-star level 6 weeks showing teams he can basically win games almost on his own, and in 3 phases, then you might get that prospect return you are hoping for without having to eat any salary. Because I would say right now, again, you could get a team to give up a top 15 prospect, trending toward maybe scratch off based on his last season production and not playing well in April, even though he's had a couple of games where it's like he's there, he's still there. So that's why you're encouraged that the calendar flipped to May, and he was outstanding, but he has to keep it going. And then speaking of maybe turning it around, Sean Burke settled down after that shaky first inning, looked like that guy again that we saw in that 4-game cameo last season. And, in the opening day, in last 3 outings, it looks like he's made the adjustment to the adjustment. Maybe baseball's not coming to take his career. He's maybe raging against the darkening of the day. Last 3 outings, he's been able to go 5 innings after getting rocked in 3 straight starts. In the Boston start at Fenway, had some defensive issues behind him. Also had another defensive gaffe behind him in Oakland, and he did need an opener, but yesterday, after that first, just crisp. Was really confident with his slider, was really confident with, his curve. And again, hopefully this is an encouraging sign that he has figured it out again, that he's made the adjustment to the adjustment, because he is vital to the team's future success. As if he can just keep being solid, even, you could have him and Shane Smith paired up with hopefully a realized potential Noah Schultz and Hagen Smith and Grant Taylor. And that's a let's go, let's win some playoff games type of rotation, if that can all come together. Well, another boost to the lineup was Chase Meidroth returning, and I'll discuss why it could not have come at a better time next on Locked On White Sox. Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices, no console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed as easily as you stream your favorite TV shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on Fire TV. And I rock a couple of smart TVs with Fire TV built in, and I also have the rest of my TVs in the house have a Fire TV stick to make sure that I can get that 4K streaming, watch more than 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from my favorite subscribed services like Netflix, Prime Video, and Disney Plus. And plus, a Fire TV Stick 4K device is more affordable and easier to travel with, which allows me to take it with me when I travel so my daughter can still watch her favorite shows. And now I can play high-quality Xbox games at a fraction of the cost of a console. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Ty Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't get the show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox is available on all major podcast platforms. So make sure to follow or subscribe on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me. So I'll admit, I love the modern-day Greek god of walks in Meidroth. But that's not why I'm dedicating a segment to his return. It's more about the context of his return as to why it matters that he's back, because, well, it's been a rough go for the White Sox the past couple of days when at least it comes to the shortstop position. You had the future at that position, and even what the GM thought would have been the present, getting pulled from playing games in the minors to basically go back to swing school. And Jacob Amaya continues to be no bat, all glove. And even yesterday, he couldn't be trusted to do one of 2 things at the plate he has shown he can actually do. Hit a sacrifice fly to drive in a run. And basically, there's 3 things that Jacob Amaya can do at the big league level, I'm convinced. He can hit sacrifice flies, he can sacrifice bunt, and he can prevent runs. That's it. And still, it's hard watching him at the plate be an even worse hitter than Martin Maldonado was last season. I forgot who tweeted it, but Martin Maldonado's it was Amaya's average is 0.079 and he's sober. Think about it. That's something that a breathalyzer would be like, oh my gosh, this guy's dead. And here's Jacob Amaya putting up like basically terrible numbers that you would think, oh my gosh, if you saw that on breathalyzer, you'd be like, this guy's dead. And also think about it. Things are so desperate for the White Sox to even try to find any production at shortstop that Bobby Dahlback got some innings at short. Now, hopefully things now are a bit solidified with Meidroth back as he returned after going on the IL with that thumb injury that made it hard for him to grip the bat. He said it's better. He said he can actually now grip the bat without any pain. And ideally, at least the rest of the season, you would have preferred Brooks Baldwin playing it short and Meidroth playing second base since that is his best defensive position. But obviously they want Brooks Baldwin to be, as Beefloaf has said, White Liori. And with the defensive, with the injuries in the outfield, you need Brooks Baldwin's bat in the lineup in the outfield more than you need a short. And, Meidroth made some nice plays in the field yesterday. And he can at least feel okay to where maybe you can do what they did yesterday. And that is he plays short through, the first 6 innings. You move him then to second, and then you bring in, Jacob Amaya, because, again, Jacob Amaya's glove, elite. Everything else, not elite. Everything else, basically someone that you want to put down at, single A Kannapolis. And then, obviously they moved Lenine Sosa to first, and Andrew Vaughn is mostly worthless at the plate and terrible defensively. So you got this, maybe you got something going now. And I know it's one game, but again, it was a preview of maybe things can finally be solidified at shortstop after a couple of days of just terrible news when it came to such a vital position. And you can, again, keep saying, hey, I want Brooks Baldwin to play short, and I want Meidroth to play second because that's his best defensive position. But, again, they need Baldwin maybe more in the outfield with all the injuries. I'm not a fan of the idea of Joshua Palacios and Michael A. Taylor both being in the lineup. If you put Andrew Benintendi sometimes at DH like they've been doing. So Meidroth can at least provide some production at short. And think about, in terms of think about where he's at right now. He's being asked to just maybe be a bit more aggressive at the plate, but otherwise they are very happy with what he's doing at the plate. And this is from Chicago Sun-Times, Kyle Williams write-up, as this is where Will Venable thinks Chase Meidroth is at. Quote, if there's one thing that I've been on him about is just letting it loose in the heart of the plate more and being more aggressive at times. At the same time, that's just in his DNA to be a selective hitter. I don't want to change who he is, but I think in time he'll learn that he needs to be more aggressive and get some good swings off early in the count on pitches over the heart, end quote. And I think that's basically the thing that he needs to do. Because again, pitchers are going to try to now get him to lift his bat off his shoulders. They might give him a little nibble, hoping that he, misses or is a little late or guesses wrong. So yeah, I agree with that. He needs to, if he sees something down in the heart of the plate, just crush it. And he admitted while he was out, he studied guys like Brent Rooker and Christian Yelich while watching on the bench. So good for him. Very mature player. And honestly, if you can get, 1 for 4 or even 2 for 3 days consistently with a walk or two and some doubles, you take that. I want him to obviously make sure he maintains his plate discipline as his OBP is 389. One moment. But I do agree with Venable that maybe you might want to swing sometimes if you see something over the heart of the plate early in the count, get that OPS up maybe a little bit. And he might just be one of those players that raises the team floor. But remember, and I'll say this until I'm blue in the face, this team just needs 1.5 to 2 F4 guys just as much as they need 3 to 6 F4 guys. They just need value. They need better players. And Meidroth has the ability to be one of those better players. And at least at shortstop through the rest of the season, he probably has that ability to play at least a decent defense through 6 or 7 innings defensively. You can take him then and move him to second base, move Lenine Sosa to first, and then I can stomach Jacob Amaya being in the lineup as a late inning defensive replacement. All right, so I'm calling an audible, not doing a series preview like I teased yesterday, and that's because Jake Burger got demoted by the Rangers, and I want to go over how that does not mean the White Sox may not end up as much of a loser in that deal, but it's just another example of how to handle the Andrew Vaughn struggles at the plate, And I also want to touch on another piece of news that ties into a trade the Sox made that still somehow makes the team sort of winning that deal. And that is next on Locked On White Sox. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Hal Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. Hope you have a great weekend. Hope you have some fun plans going on. Recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox or wherever they get their podcasts, as this show is available on all major podcast platforms. So I did have it planned to do a series preview, but then looking at the Sox and Astros series, I thought, well, Lance McCullers, he's returning to the Astros starting rotation. And Framber Valdez, he's just been inconsistent. Otherwise, it's just, hey, can the White Sox finally clear the bar of keeping positive momentum going? That's it. That's basically what you need to watch for in the series. So calling an audible and going over the recent news of the Texas Rangers demoting old friend Jake Burger and then Trey McGough. He's retiring, according to Future Sox. I got the tweet up. Future Sox, right-hand pitcher Trey McGough has voluntarily retired. And then Ken Rosenthal, he tweeted this out at Ken_Rosenthal. Rangers demoting 1B Jake Burger and promoting 1B Blaine Krim from AAA. Sources tell the @Athletic plan is for Burger to reset and return soon. So for Burger getting demoted, I saw in Sox social media world a little bit of perception that, hey, the White Sox, maybe they didn't make out that bad in that 2023 trade deadline deal. They did make out bad. That's one of the worst trades in White Sox history. Jake Eder pitched one game for the White Sox. It represented the dysfunction of the front office of Kenny Williams and Rick Hahn running it. Burger helped the Marlins get to the playoffs. He hit home runs for them last year, and then they leveraged him in a trade for more future assets. Marlins win by a mile. Instead, I want to focus on how this is just another example of how to handle Andrew Vaughn's struggles. And plus, Trey McGough's retirement means the White Sox got nothing much for Eloy Jimenez, but still, I'd rather have gotten nothing much than nothing at all, like I thought they would. And even getting a career minor leaguer reliever, that could be something that the White Sox get at the trade deadline if Andrew Vaughn can somehow figure out, at least maybe to get back to replacement level. Although I would still say his trade value is player to be named later levels. But Burke is getting demoted despite being 29 because he's hitting 190 with a 561 OPS and 3 home runs. Andrew Vaughn is hitting 167 with a 479 OPS with 3 home runs, and he's still getting love from the White Sox front office. And I get the Rangers are in win now mode, and they can't afford to be patient. But still, this is another example of a power hitting first baseman / third baseman who has had streaks of hitting the cover off the ball, getting demoted instead of getting patience and love. And that's what the White Sox should be doing. They should be following the Rangers' lead. And I get the White Sox can afford to be patient with Vaughn since winning and losses don't matter right now. But they also, again, have that player at AAA and Tim Elko, who is just raking, and the fans are screaming to see. They're screaming to see, even if it's just a few months of your main Mercedes-like production, they would rather take that. But once again, this organization is showing it's willing to, not give the tough love approach, or even in the case of the Rangers, just hit the reset button. They were refusing to take that path. And to be fair to Vaughn, he does have a 4-game hit streak, but literally it's just a hit. He's just hitting singles. He's not doing damage, as his slug has actually dipped 3 percentage points during this 4-game streak. And he was replaced late game defensively yesterday. He also has 5 strikeouts during this 4-game hit streak. And as I discussed recently, he's starting to wail at pitches badly at the zone. I mean, just flail at them. He's just throwing his bat at it. And I don't know why. It's called pressing, maybe. But with what Elko is doing, it can't hurt to stop forcing Vaughn down our throats. And also sometimes you just got to hit the reset button or give that tough love to say you're going down. We don't know if we value you anymore. I mean, Spencer Torkelson has a 902 OPS and 9 home runs this season after the Tigers pulled the demotion card last year. And again, I'd rather have a 902 OPS and 9 home runs than what we're seeing from Andrew Vaughn consistently. And even if Getz didn't cite what other organizations did in terms of pulling Colson Montgomery, if he doesn't cite in the same press conference where he, basically professes his love for Andrew Vaughn, when he said, he basically says other organizations have sent players to the spring training facility for a couple of weeks to work on their swing when he was talking about Colson Montgomery. So he basically cites what other organizations have done. But if he didn't do that, I could see, well, maybe the White Sox just want to do their own thing, even though it's not the right thing. But he did. He cites, hey, here's what the organizations do, and we're going to try to do the same thing with Montgomery, but we're not going to do the same thing with Vaughn. So, that's where you kind of are just like, man, you would just like to see them, do exactly what the Rangers and the Tigers did. And then with Mago, even though he's retiring, just getting something for another all-time frustrating player in Eloy makes the White Sox, I think, the clear winner in that trade. Especially after Eloy cooled off, after it was looking like the Orioles fixed him for a few weeks, to the point where he's now in AAA playing for the Rays organization. And, Mago, I think maybe he was just, he's pitched well last year, AAA. Maybe this was just one of those things where he's now struggling. And he was just like, you know what? If I can't get to the majors on the White Sox, the heck with it. It's probably never going to happen. I don't know. The Future Sox did not cite why he is deciding to retire. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And I'll be back on Monday to discuss how the Sox did over the weekend and provide a Minor League Monday report. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion regarding the great performances from Miguel Vargas, Luis Robert Jr., and Sean Burke that led to a big win. Chase Meidroth's return coming at a great time, and Jake Berger's demotion being another example to demote Andrew Vaughn. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Dub or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. Have a great day. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you Monday.